What if every no you've ever heard wasn't a dead end, but a divine detour? Think about it. How would your story shift if rejection wasn't personal, but actually directional? That's the fire Dr. Albert Bramante brings to the mic today. And let me tell you, my friend, this conversation, it is not just eye-opening, it is soul-waking. So welcome to this episode. Welcome to Embers Rising. I'm your host, Wendy J. And if this is your first time joining us, man, welcome. Thank you so much for pressing play. We don't just talk about mindset here. We actually challenge it. We fuel those embers inside your soul to light up and go after your calling. And before we dive into this, don't forget to subscribe to the Embers Rising newsletter. Every week, we drop straight fire into your inbox, mindset shifts, behind the scenes stories of Dave and I, and tools to help you rise higher in life, business, and purpose. You can go to wendyj.com/newsletter or hit the link in the show notes to get on the list. You'll be glad you did. Now, today, I am sitting down with someone who knows exactly what it takes to rise when the world tells you to sit down. Dr. Albert Bramante isn't just a high performance coach. He's a mindset architect. For over 2 decades, he's worked at the intersection of psychology, creativity, and performance. From actors landing breakthrough roles to students becoming top tier professionals, his work is all about flipping fear into fuel. By the way, since you press play today on this episode, I know it's because you're ready for more. You've hit walls before, but deep down, you know those walls are not meant to block you. They're meant to bounce you toward the path you were really meant to walk. So shout out to our listeners, the builders, the bold ones. Let's get into this. Well, hello, Dr. Albert Bramante. So honored to have you here with me today. Super fired up. It's just so great to see you. Before we actually get in, I do have to ask, how would you like me to introduce you? How do I use your name? You've got so many hats here.
Yeah, well, my name is Dr. Albert Bramante. I am a talent agent as well as college professor. I've been doing that for 22 years. And, I've been working in the mindset work field for a while too, because especially working with actors and performers of all types, there's a lot of things that come up with mindset, imposter syndrome, fear of success, and all types of blocks that can come up.
That is so great. So, okay, should I call you Dr. Bramante? Is that the best?
Yeah, I mean, you can refer to me as Albert. That's fine too.
Okay. All right. Well, so you just took my question from me, and I was going to ask, how do you introduce yourself to someone brand new, knowing who you are with your being a professor, a coach, an agent, an LLP practitioner? I mean, this is a lot of hats.
Well, I definitely introduced myself as Dr. Albert Bramante, but then afterwards I can be Dr. Albert, whichever is easier to to do. I'm very like kind of laid back and informal like that, so
I love that.
I definitely like my title, but I'm not, gonna be one of those sticklers where I have to be called all the time doctor. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
that's
love
just
that.
who I am.
Okay, so I'll talk to the listener now who's meeting you for the first time. Let's strip away the titles then and tell us, who is Albert?
Well, Albert definitely had a complicated past. I really did. And I'll speak in one person, but um, that sounds a little weird talking in third person. But anyway, that's just me. So I was different. I was born in a family where I was different. I come from a blue collar family, athletics through and through. My brothers, I'm the youngest of five. I have three older brothers. They were all into sports and football and baseball. My father was a football coach. That was my older brother. So I was a little bit different than most people. And at least with growing up, I was more into books. I was more into reading. I was more into mental. I was a thinker. So that was a bit different. So I didn't fit in. So I spent a lot of time reading. And I was essentially really the only child because I didn't really have anybody my age. So I was the type of person I always hung out with the adults. And in high school, I started reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, to Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And then Also read a primer on cognitive behavioral therapy, Feeling Good by David Burns, which is not exactly um, a typical teenage reading one. I get that. So I was a bit different. This is the early 90s now. So I was a different type of child. I became I was very always curious. I was very always, you know, being criticized and chastised, being nosy, in the sense. So I was always like the child but I was very curious. That's how I reframe it now. I was always a curious. I wanted to know more. And did I stick my nose something where it didn't belong? Maybe. But I was I defend myself. I was always just very curious and inquisitive. So that led me to study psychology. That led me to study human behavior and became very fascinated by human behavior, human dynamics, why we do what we do, what makes us tick. And that was always a question I was asking. Even before I formally studied psychology, I was always interested in what makes people tick. Why do people do what they do? So that was sort of like where I really started shining into. But I was also interested in creativity too. Like I was in a drama club in high school. I was involved in a lot of clubs and organizations, but drama club was one of them. I was took some acting classes in college, theater classes as electives, three electives, and they were very interesting to me. I didn't really know I was going to pursue that, so that was more of a, hey, this is fun type of thing. And then when I received my master's degree, I now had to look for a job. And fortunately, when I say fortunately, it opened up a lot of doors for me. Unfortunately, it was a national tragedy, worldwide tragedy. 9/11 had happened. And so I found myself doing a lot of volunteer work in the beginning. Then I worked for a couple different organizations. And then eventually I started teaming up again with actors and filmmakers with the other work I was doing, and was like, "Oh, this is fun." Remember, because it brought back interest back in my high school and college days. So let me go into it. So I started off as an actor, which is how most agents and casting directors in my business really get started. And I realized I loved behind the scenes more. I didn't really have the personality really or the training to really be an actor, but I enjoyed being around actors. I enjoyed being around creative people, filmmakers, entertainers. They were like my people, and I felt more identified with them than other academics. I went to a lot of academic conferences, societies, which is all great, and I enjoyed them, but I didn't really feel I belonged because it was too stuffy, too snooty, too elitist, and that's not who I am at all.
I love that. I love.
And yeah, I know also I'm a teacher by heart. So my mom was a school teacher for 30, 2 years. My, kindergarten, first grade. My father and older brother were coaches. I think kind of having both of that in my DNA was just sort of like, okay, I'm a teacher. And so I've always imagined and even fantasized about being in front of a classroom. Even when I was in junior high, I always wanted to be in front of the classroom. So then when after receiving a couple of years after receiving my master's degree, I found myself in front of a college classroom. This is great. This is what I love doing, and I've been doing that ever since. I still teach part time. I still, yeah, I love what I do, and I feel like that's who I am by heart as a teacher, a coach, a teacher. That's really who Albert is, a coach and a teacher. And
I mean, I got to stop you and say, like, wait, this is crazy. You've kind of been a high performer since a child,
well, yeah.
which is amazing. I mean, I say that in such a best way because I mean, you were attracted to Dale Carnegie from the very get go. It kind of feels like a little bit of my childhood. My mom really grew up on Norman Vincent Peale, and so our family was all positive thinking,
Hmm.
and drove right into Brian Tracy and everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Eat that
way back.
frog.
So
Yeah, I wrote that book.
yes, yes. So I love this that your journey has taken you through this. It's almost like I feel like everything is like connected for you because your childhood kind of brought you right back into where you saw yourself, in that teacher's place, which brings me to my next question because you earned your PhD. And I want to talk about that because I want to know what that journey really taught you about perseverance and identity.
Well, I'll start with the identity factor. When I was younger, my grandmother on my father's side, God rest her soul, was very much into me becoming, better than everybody else in my family.
Oh,
She wanted me to go to college, and I even told her, Grandma, I'm gonna be a doctor. This is when I was like, 9, 10, 11 years old. And she's like, I hope I live to see this. Unfortunately, that never happened. But
oh,
I, one of my drivers was to honor her legacy by becoming a doctor. Now, bio was never my strong suit, nor was math. So mm, my options were little limited. So I was like, let me get a PhD. This is the next best thing. At least I'll still be called, I have a doctor in my title, although I'm not a medical doctor by any means. So that was the identity for it. And even in high school, so when I was a junior in high school, most people were saying, "Yeah, I want to get a good job." I wanted a PhD even way before I went to college. I was like, I want to have a PhD. So it was a little bit derailed because when I was going for my master's degree, I went for straight through. I went for my bachelor's, master's. So 4 years for my bachelor's, 2 years for my master's, straight through. So I was 24 when I had my master's degree. And the last semester, I had applied to three PhD programs. And I guess I underestimated how competitive PhD programs are, especially in psychology. I didn't get in. So now I was faced with a bit of identity challenge of like, okay,
interesting.
September is coming along, and now I'm not going to be in school. I was in school all my life. So I had to deal with that a bit. And that was not easy. And then, I got caught up with the 9/11 work and then all the different charities and the teaching. That I said, and then building my talent agency up, I said, you know what? After a few years later, I said, where's my legacy going to be? Okay, well, I just sat down and I said, you know what? I want to honor my grandmother's, the promise I made to my grandmother and to myself, really. And also finish, I'm halfway there. I already have my master's. So let me enroll to a PhD program. And so I enrolled in an online distance learning program. Now, online programs are a lot more acceptable than they were 20 years ago. And there was a bit of I guess you could say, a challenge that I had with trying to explain to, this is where I think I'm not so comfortable with elitism, is because a lot of people were looking at me like saying, oh, well, I received a PhD from a land-based university. What can an online
Oh,
university teach you? And I'm like, okay, and then when I would talk to these people, like, you have no idea, you've never been in an online school, I can tell you that right away. Because it's actually a bit harder when it comes to the perseverance aspect to be an online student. It's a
right.
lot harder than you think it is because there's a lot of discipline that you need on your own. You are completely on your own in an online, education, especially where I was going to school. It was like there was no interaction. I had to do everything myself. So it was a complete do-it-yourself, which, had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is I could really be anywhere. I didn't have to clock in and commute to take night classes. I wouldn't have had the time to do that. So it was a lot of hard work. Now, I'm a thinker, I'm a reader, so I actually liked the coursework. I found it so exciting. I was like, doing papers, I could knock out papers in a weekend, and PhD papers are typically 25, 30 pages. They're not your 5 to 7 pages that you did in undergrad or in high school. These were like 30, 25, 30 pages, just content, not including the sources. So it was a lot of work.
And
I'm not going to lie.
this is still PhD for psychology.
Yes.
Ooh,
Now,
that's
the
so
one thing
interesting.
that really tested my perseverance was a dissertation process.
Mm.
This is unlike anything I've ever experienced, and I'm grateful for it. I'm glad I persevered. I would never do it again. Some might. I have some peers in my field that are like they have 2 or 3 PhDs. One's enough for me because of the immense process the dissertation was. Now, yes, it gave me a lot of great inspiration, learnings that, and I, which we'll talk about later, but that was the basis of my book. So it gave me a lot of great insights, but it was a really an arduous process. revisions, of communication, of getting, doing like sometimes revising a document 50 to 100 times,
Okay,
getting
so
it back saying that was that. So that took a while. And there were moments where I'm going to be completely honest, transparent, where I was like, nope, I'm giving up. I'm doing,
yes, that
and
you're like reading my questions. This is crazy because I have on this question, it says, for the listener who's thinking about giving up, and you just said that. What is the moment you thought about giving up? What was it? Was that like three quarters of the way through? And what got you through it?
I was more closer to finishing it
Wow,
than I was because the coursework for me was easy. That was, you know, I mean, yeah, it was a lot
in
of
the
work, but
bag.
I never even crossed my mind to quit during the coursework. And because again, I'm a thinker, I'm a bookworm, so this was fun to do. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading, I enjoyed writing, I enjoyed, communicating about and having dialogues and this. So this was fun. The dissertation was a process. So there were moments where I was like, because I also at the time to throw kind of a bit of a curveball and a good thing, but I was hired right when I started my beginning the dissertation phase, full time where I was
Oh
teaching
wow,
at the time.
wow, that's a
So
lot.
I was building a company, which was also a full, and then teaching full time. And for anyone who's listening, when you teach part time and full time, there's a big difference. Because it's not just well, part time. I just teach my classes and I leave. I do course prep and grading, but that's on my own time. When you teach full time, you have to have office hours, which is,
Oh yeah.
I you have to have committee work, community service to the college, special task forces that the college has. So you have to do a lot of service to the college. So I was working, 40, 60 hours a week just on teaching alone, in addition to trying to juggle an agency, which at that time was failing miserably, because I couldn't keep up, and trying to do a dissertation. And I had a lot of
Wow.
people tell me you're making a mistake. You shouldn't be, you should focus on a dissertation, but like, no, I can't give up the job, which had really good benefits at the time and a good salary and health insurance. So I couldn't give that up. So fate would have it that, within 5 years later, I found myself not working, and which was a big, big blow at the time of me. So of my identity, because I kind of assumed and fell under the illusion I was gonna be working here for the rest of my life. Newsflash, no. So that took me down, and I fell into a depression. I'll be honest with you,
Mm.
back in 2012, 12-ish. I fell into a bit of a depression, and I just thought about giving up everything. Why am I getting this PhD for? What's the whole point of everything? And what I said when it was my last semester of this is early 2013, because at least the good thing where I was working at, they at least gave me an extra year, like a severance package. Like they didn't give me like a severance package. They gave me a year's extra work. So like at least I was able to prep for everything. So I said to myself, I was like, look, I'm gonna spend now's the time. After I kind of everything like when my eye, everything when the dust settled after the was licking my wounds about. I said, now's the time. I got two things to do. I can really go hard in on the agency, and I can finish this PhD because now's the time to do it. So that, and now maybe this is what the universe is telling me to do, which is why they took the rug under me for that other job. So that's when I said, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to work hard. And that's what I would tell anybody to do is just work harder. And sometimes you may have the desire to flee because that's what we do. We have it when things get a little scary. It's natural to want to run away, like fight or flight, mode with our brain and our system. So what I would tell people to do is just to stick with it. As now, if you need to take a break, that's fine. You need to maybe take a couple weeks off and then come back to it, great. But I wouldn't, especially when you work so hard for something, because like with a PhD, no, it wasn't cheap. I put a lot, dropped well over 6 figures into a PhD program, well over 6 figures, and student loan debt. Like I might as well get something out of this. So let me double down and work harder now that I had the time. And I was like, and I also put a lot of money into my businesses, and so now's the
Wow.
time that this is going to either make it or break it. So I just doubled down and worked harder, and that's what I would tell people that are thinking of quitting. If you need to take some time off, that's one thing, and honor your time and honor your space and honor your mind and body. That's the main thing I would tell you to do. But I would think twice about fleeing though. I wouldn't do that. And so that's what I did. I just said, okay, now's the time, it took me a little bit over a year, but I finished my PhD
It's amazing.
and I built it up my agency. And after receiving my PhD, I was like, okay, now I have a little more time. I want to go back to teaching, but I only want to do it part time.
Yeah.
I have no desire to go into full time anymore teaching because also, I'm not going to get too salacious here, but there's a lot of politics when you're when you're full time higher ed.
Yeah. That's
And
incredible. I mean, I'm
I,
just I'm like I'm still hung up on your journey. I mean, oh my god, that it just took you. You never gave up on something that you set your mind to, which is so honorable, and the fact that you were doing so many things at the same time, working that job, working with your agency, and then having that perseverance to still go after that PhD, and then still fighting for it, and then getting it. I mean, congratulations, because that is so hard to do. It is amazing. And I think that the advice you're sharing is saying to the listener who's like, hey, I'm feeling like giving up right now, you're saying, don't give up, keep going,
yeah,
even if you have to take a break.
yeah, honor yourself, honor your body, honor your mind, and do what you need to do. Um, Sometimes it could just be your experience of some feeling of burnout at the moment. So that's where I said sometimes take a break, take a small, take a step away for whatever you're doing for a couple of weeks or a month, whatever you need to do that because, but don't, especially if something your dream, don't
Yeah,
give it up. Don't do that. If you, even if it may take you a little bit longer to get there, that's fine. But don't give up. That's the main thing there because if I would have done that, because even if I said, okay, I'm not going to do this PhD anymore, I still have to pay back my loans. I still have to um, get a job, and there are a lot of people, believe it or not, that never finish a PhD, that started and never finish it, and
100%.
they have what's called an ABD designation, all but dissertation, which is really nothing, but it's like. For me, if I had that title, it would have been like it would have felt like a failure because I'm like, it's like almost like a consolation prize,
Oh,
you
totally.
know. And I didn't want that. I was like, no, I want to be a PhD, and this is why, another reason why I stuck through it is that's what makes a PhD a very distinguishable degree, and that's what somebody kind of like told. I kind of was like hearing other people's voices telling me this too. Look, the PhD is so, distinguishable because it's not just any other degree.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of hard work, sacrifice, and sweating, and and tears sometimes. And so that's why I was like, no, I'm not a quitter. I'm not a quitter. I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna double down harder if I have to. And that's what I did. And I'll tell you one thing, and not the greatest feeling was to hear my name get called, walking across the stage and getting robed
Ah,
as a,
I love
getting
that.
that robe for a PhD was amazing.
I
And
love that.
then eventually be introduced as doctor for the first time was an absolutely amazing, experience.
Oh, you'll always
And it's
remember
one of the
that.
best days of my life
Ah,
was that moment. So it was all worth it 100%.
that's so great.
So I want all the listeners to have that moment too, to where this is so great because even sometimes when you finally make that achievement, the more, even if you worked really hard for it, it's gonna make mean so much more now. So that's why it's important to just stick with it, not to give up, and honor yourself, but don't give up. So that was definitely the process there. Like I said, it was a lesson in tenacity and resilience and persistence, and
I love that.
so that was definitely a big lesson that I learned and needed. And one
Well,
thing I've learned, and especially coming back from looking at things in retrospect, our painful lessons and painful experiences are sometimes, a lot of times, the best things that could happen to us. Like now, being let go from a tenure track full time position let me down this path I'm at now. And at the time, it seemed like torture. At the time, it seemed like there was no way out of it. But it was the best thing that happened to me. And the best thing that that I could have ever done was to walk away. And so it's hard, and sometimes when you're going through the throes of something, it's hard to see that. And people did tell me that, oh, you're gonna look back at this, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, because I was going through it. I was like,
yeah,
it didn't seem that, so I kind of even poo-pooed that idea, like, oh, you're telling me that that's gonna be the best thing to happen to you? This is foolish, but it truly is, and I can tell you that from experience going through that. So, that was kind of like a fire I had to walk through, to
I
kind
love
of
it.
get to the other side.
I
So,
love it. Well, let's shift gears because I want to talk about your agency. Now, you've coached actors to land life changing roles, Albert. Tell us a story of someone whose career you helped shift.
well, I met this actress that she was in my office. She was a little timid, a little shy, a little unsure of herself. Did a couple of short, independent films and she had a very unique look to her. And I remember I was having a meeting with her about possibly working with her. And a job came across my desk for a TV show. It was like a small role. And it was, talking to her, I was like kind of like, multitasking, reading the role description. I'm like, this is her to a T. So right then and there, I put her information in and I called the casting director and said, you need to meet this person right now. And the next day she had an audition and she wound up booking the role.
Oh my gosh, that's
And
amazing.
that rarely happens like that, like, in such a synchronous moment like that. Very rarely happens. And she wound up moving to LA, so I wound up having to no longer work with her. Fortunately, and fortunately, I got the chance to help her career. And she went to London, studied for a while, so she got that inspiration, came back, started from LA, Los Angeles, started booking a lot of TV roles. Last year, became a series regular on Law and Order SVU. Like one of the
Hey,
main
that's so
cast
cool.
members. And I was so proud of her because, I was like, 10 years ago, the little girl that was timid, the young girl that was timid in my office, is now really flourishing. Another actress I worked with was a mom. She was in her midlife. She started acting midlife, which is kind of like a taboo in our industry, especially being a woman of middle age starting out acting. Unless it's really hard. What we were told, like unless you're really an established actor, getting started in the middle ages, whether you're male or female, is tough,
Hmm.
incredibly challenging. But she persevered, and we got her in a few couple of gigs, and again she wanted to move into LA, and now she, last 2 years ago she started recurring on another Law and Order SVU, wrote a few episodes of SVU, and now was a series regular on the new Dexter reboot.
Oh,
So
wow.
So that was also another amazing experience because just to watch people flourish is what I like. And to see people, even though I may not have been a part of the latest things that they're doing, the fact that I helped get them started is what fulfills me.
Tell us more about your agency.
So, I mean, typically, we are like every, the fundamental we're every agency where we find gigs for actors. And there's a lot of us in New York and LA. So, but with my agency, we value diversity, we value inclusion. So I look at ourselves as kind of like architects of a career and helping, like I really consider myself, I help actors fulfill be connected to their dream roles. So I not just help, I guide them a little bit too. And this is where like the mindset imposter syndrome comes in. And that was what my dissertation was on because a lot of actors, when I first started, were engaging in self-sabotaging behaviors. And that's where I kind of but that's where I did my dissertation on. That was what led me down that, was to why were actors self-sabotaging. And that was a big thing too. And sometimes I feel like we have to talk actors off the ledge a bit, and help them, recover their strength. So it's really, like I kind of look at it like sometimes as helping actors get out of their own way
Mhm.
and just people in general getting out of their own way. So my agency, like I said, we work with everybody. We work with, all ethnicities, all ages. We have kids from senior, we have people, as young as 5 and as old as, and they're close to 90. So we represent a wide range and all types, and that's one thing I've always valued myself on is inclusion, diversity, and really giving a voice and helping to tell stories.
What is the challenges that these performers face right today?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, the typical challenge of any, for the past 20, 30 years that I've been in the industry is really seeing people work, getting work in a very competitive and overly saturated space. Because there's hundreds of thousands of actors in the United States, alone. 97 to 98% of them are employed constantly. So that's a challenge. That's not an easy statistic. So, but now what we're seeing, especially, the past decade, I would say has been really challenging because we had the pandemic in 2020,
Mhm.
which really, a lot of production went on the standstill, especially live theater, because no one's going to go to the theater, obviously, during the pandemic. And then that took a while to come back. Film and TV came back first, but then theater took almost a couple of years. So, and then to kind of put a wrench into things, 2023, we had the Writers Guild strike and the Screen Actors Guild strike, which we were just beginning to get a groove back from COVID. Now we had the strikes. So that put a really damper on things now. And then, one of the things I talk a lot about is the use of AI, and that's been somewhat threatening, not necessarily directly, fully, but I say one of the industries that's going to have a bit of a difficult time with AI is going to be voice actors
Mhm.
because of all the, AI voice clones and voice generators out there. It's going to be a lot cheaper for you to hire to do an AI voiceover for a project than it would be to hire an actual voiceover actor.
Yeah.
So and the software is so really getting good now that you're not almost it's almost hard to distinguish what's an AI voice and what's a real voice now. Earlier times you could tell that. Like sometimes you could tell when you're watching video if it's narrated by an AI voice because it's very robotic like. But now they're starting to get more sophisticated, in coding and more,
For sure.
more coders. So now you're getting voices that can vary their pitches and all that. And there was some discussion, especially after the strike, because one of the issues with the strikes in both unions were AI. What are you going to do for AI, protection? Because now you can have, you can create, AI clones of actors. You can create AI clones of people, and put them in movies. Tom Hanks said in an interview that he'll be making movies way after he's gone because he can just replicate a clone. So we need more protection on that, and
Yeah.
that's a challenge. And at least to a point where if you are going to use someone's likeness, then they should be paid. The just like as if they're going to be in the project. I, so I mean that's a minimum that they can do, but that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to. The difficulty here is how do you regulate this?
Yeah.
How do you regulate all that? And even when it comes to like writing and intellectual property, how do you copy? How do you protect something that's AI generated? How do you claim that? There was a big controversy when AI first was really coming up in the market 2 years ago. The recording artist Drake, had a major claim because someone created a song in his like in an image in his likeness. That fans were coming up to him, oh, I like, Drake, I love your song about this. And he's like, I never wrote a song about that. And then
Mm,
so that's going to be a challenge.
yeah.
And
100%.
recently in the news, they debuted a synthetic AI clone of an actress named Tilly, who made making headlines of like the only thing that I can tell you from what I find with this is it's hard for them to. I don't know how you're going to give an AI clone direction to fully show emotions without it being robotic,
Yeah.
which is good for now. And the one thing that AI lacks is creativity. So I'm not too worried about that. I am worried, like I said, more about the voice actors and sometimes the images. And also, now I don't necessarily work with these people, but there's a lot of union actors that do background work professionally, and that's how they make their money, and that's how they make their health insurance for the Screen Actors Guild. Now you're talking about like with CGI, you can CGI crowd scene, CGI extras. So, and it's gonna be a lot
Interesting.
cheaper than to hire actual extras. So that's gonna be interesting to see because the challenge here is like, okay, yes, you want to maintain the human connection to things, but it's going to be much cheaper on these production companies to use AI.
To do it. Yeah. Well, speaking of AI, you teach AI, and tell us. I was working on that, and learning more about that. You're teaching creatives and educators how to use AI. Why is this so important right now?
Well, it's good because it helps automate a lot of the stuff you're doing. And what I kind of teach is it's my thing is more about how to use it, but still maintain your voice and still maintain your message. Because the one thing that um, if you just were to use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Grok or whatever large language model you use,
Oh yeah.
you're going to get very robotic information. Great, sometimes good research. It's like Google on steroids, but it's not going to be your own voice unless you train it. So there's ways you can train, and this is one thing that I tell people to do is to train the models to sound like you.
Yes.
So what I done, the way I do that, and this is for anybody who's listening, is you take some part of a lot of your writing that you've done, without the assistance of AI. Like I wrote a lot of blog articles before ChatGPT came out. So what I did was I said to put a prompt and I said take I cut and pasted some of the article like three or four of the articles. I said analyze my writing style and in the column tell me exactly what my style is, my tone, my sentence structure, and it gave me the spreadsheet. Then I put that spreadsheet, my custom instructions, into my model and said, okay, I need you to sound like that and produce every response like this. Now, is it perfect? No. I still have to massage the copy a lot and add my own stuff into it. But it's a little bit better than if I just went cold into the models. So the important thing is to train the model to sound like you, but also add your own input. Don't
Yes.
expect the models, whichever you're going to use, again, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, to do the work for you. It's not, and it shouldn't.
Is
Hmm.
there anything, Albert, that you are using AI with acting in your performers today?
Well, sometimes I will help them with researching a role. You know, uh, a time error, like if they're have to prepare for a specific time error or a specific type of role, so
Mm,
they can use AI for information. Um, they can also use it to kind of like work their website copy, maybe their letters when they send pitches out to optimize. But that would be the way I would do that. But it's always augmented. It should always augment what you're doing, not replace what you're doing. Um,
I
it
like
should
that.
amplify and augment. So again, you come up with the idea. Maybe you run it through an AI model, and then you then tweak it, so that it's yours. And so I would say, that it should be more than 50-50, like
Hmm.
50% your idea and 50% the AI thing, because otherwise it's going to sound robotic and your audience is going to automatically know this isn't you. Because we start to see this all the time. I mean, I think now, especially the past, year and a half, all we're doing is seeing AI content.
Yeah. True. Yeah, and we're speaking with each other as human beings still. I mean, whether AI is there or not, I mean, we're still connecting, we're selling, we're performing in front of
Yeah.
humans, not just
And
AI. So,
and that's the one thing. Another thing that I think we need to maintain, that is the human connection. Unfortunately, a lot of the bots are, and I'm not too sure how I feel about this. A lot of the bots are now becoming more conversational
hmm,
and starting to mimic human interaction. And the way it's now, which is great on some aspects, but on the other side, it's, I think, giving people a pseudo intimacy or pseudo connection, where people are now, especially a lot of young, not to be stereotypical, but young Gen Zers and millennials are turning to AI bots as companionship, friends, and
yes,
not humans,
I
because
hear
it can
this.
give you that illusion that you're speaking to a human being, but you're not. You're speaking to a robot. You're speaking to a
Right.
non-human. But it's convincing you like it is, and you're starting to see, not a lot, but we're starting to see people turning to, getting these AI girlfriends and AI boyfriends. I'm like, that to
That's a
me is
little
never,
much. Yeah.
that's a little much. And if anybody ever watched the show Black Mirror,
Yes.
I feel like somehow that's starting to come, like starting to creep up a little bit in reality
Of
in some of the
reality.
episodes.
Yeah. Totally. Well, let's switch gear again from your AI because I want to dive back into you teaching psychology and um, what is the one lesson that changes the game for creatives and professionals when we're talking about teaching psychology? How would someone apply what you teach outside the classroom in their everyday life?
Well, that's the important thing. I think the important role of any teacher or professor should always make connections to the material to real life. Because otherwise, it's just going to go in one ear and out the other. This is why most of the time we forget 90% of what we learn in college,
Right.
school, because it's not important to us. We're not using it. So I do a lot of self-reflection in my classes. And I've had a lot of students tell me I'm not like other professors. I'm not a fan of busy work. I don't just have them do a research paper again that they can now use ChatGPT for, and not even write a word of it and pass it off on their own. That's not going to teach you anything. What. So I always have them do a lot of exercises where they connect the material that they're learning into their real life. So there's a lot of prompts that I use, writing prompts that are self-reflective in nature. Well, they have to think critically, but they also have to reflect the information back into their own life,
I
because
like
that's
that.
really the value of education. I think if you can get students to self-reflect, I think that's a really powerful teaching mechanism. if to reflect, because I don't think we do enough of that in society.
I was gonna say that,
Self-reflection.
like, if you can reflect in the classroom, now you can take that outside the classroom and start doing that yourself, for what you're thinking about, the values that you're creating, the tasks, the actions that you're moving forward with. That is a superpower skill.
It really is. If you, one of the no, that's one of the principles of learning is, and I use this in my classes too. I'm like, true learning is when you can teach what you've been learning to somebody else who doesn't know that.
100%.
So, if we can create mock situations like that where we can, have you teach that to somebody else, because when you can do that, you've learned it, and that's the principal thing. And I much rather have them learn a little bit of information than to be teaching them, a whole lot of nothing, nonsense where they're going to walk away from the class saying, okay, that was boring, that was a waste of time, and which
For
is
sure.
I, which is 80% of my college education. I'll say that right away. It was like, I'm not going to use this stuff.
Right. And so then you don't apply it, and then you're feeling like already lost.
Yeah,
Starting over, so, and you don't want your students to walk away like that. You want to feel confident,
absolutely not. I want, even if it's the last psychology class they take, because, realistically speaking, I mean, I know I work with a lot of psych majors, in the class that I teach, but there are some that are just taking this class as an elective, and I get that. And they have other interests, which are not psychology. I get that too. Understand that. And I want to maximize their time. So,
it's great.
and that's what I tell students the first day of class. Have them introduce themselves to class, and everybody was. I teach a lot on Zoom now because we're synchronous. The class that I teach is synchronous, online but synchronous, where we're meeting live twice a week, just on Zoom.
It's great.
And so the first day of class, I'll have students introduce themselves. Again, get them to step outside their comfort zone. Many of them may not like doing that in the beginning, but get them to introduce themselves. And beyond the, hi, I'm so and so, I'm majoring in so and so. It's like, okay, what do you want to get out of this class? And tell me something that you're passionate about, and tell me something interesting about yourself. And one of the things I say, and then the last thing I say is when I ask what you want to get out of this class, do not answer with I want an A or 3 credits.
Right.
What do you really want to get out of this class? Because that's your money's being spent to be for you taking this class.
That's great, Albert. I love that.
You would want something out of it rather than just an A, or rather than 3 credits out of the class. Something should be of value, tangible value here, knowledge. And that's the first right out the gate we're doing that.
That's great.
And um because I want them to and that's personal, maybe that's a little selfish of me, but I want them to walk out of there with something aside from 3 credits, aside from a grade. The purpose for me is to have them walk outside with some knowledge and that they can apply in their own life. Because psychology is all about dealing with people. I mean, no matter what profession you're in, you're always going to have to deal with people, your own emotions, even, and understanding yourself. That's a big thing too.
Yes. And now tell us, I kind of want to tie this into NLP. I don't know if our listeners know what NLP is. Can you explain that and how you tie this into your
Sure.
practice or how you use this?
Yeah, well, it stands for neuro linguistic programming. Now, what so I mean, we could probably spend an entire, you know,
Episode
uh,
on that.
episode on that alone, but it really stands for using language and your imagination, imagery, your engaging in neurology, using language to engage in neurology into changing, thought patterns, changing beliefs, changing feelings, and even modeling excellence. Now, it was developed in the early 70s by, two gentlemen, Richard Bandler and John Grinder in the early 70s. And it was really designed as a technology because they used the metaphor of a computer programming, and how we can model excellence. So, for example, if I'm teaching somebody to be confident, You want to be a more confident person. What's the first thing you do? Well, how do confident people act? How do confident people stand? How do they walk? You know, how do they project their voice? So let's break it down from that rather than because when you start embodying the physical action of something, the mental action will follow.
Love it. And now, do you teach that in your psychology classes?
Indirectly,
Indirectly. Okay.
indirectly. Um, One of the things that it's all about perspectives too. So using language. So one of the things I will say, because one of the questions I get asked a lot in my classes is the first day, Professor, do you offer extra credit? And I then draw back and say, why are you asking me that? I know why they're asking me that, but I like them to think about this. Like, why, I'm curious, why are you asking me that? Are you telling me now that you believe that you're not going to be able to do well? Did you ever think that maybe you won't need the extra credit? Do you ever think that maybe you're knowledgeable enough and smart enough that you'll do the work fine? You know,
Good questions. Yeah.
and because automatic, and I'll kind of explain this automatically. Here's what you believe you're doing. When you're saying, you're wondering if I'm going to offer extra credit or not, you're automatically assuming that you're going to need it, and that you're assuming that you're not going to be intelligent enough or worthy enough of getting that grade. And they don't really know. And that's when they stutter too. I'm like, well, why do you, because I want to know that. And then I'll tie that into how limiting beliefs happen and
So,
how maybe their early childhood, when they were in school, they were yelled at by teachers or told by teachers that this is a stupid question. You can't do this. You're not going to amount to anything, or you're not going to do well. And they got that message across. And then I usually use math anxiety. Now, I did mention earlier that, I'm not a math person, but I'll even call myself on this too, because, and I'll explain how that's a myth when people say I'm not good in math. No, that's a myth. That's a limiting belief. And
mm,
so that's how I'll use NLP to demonstrate like what the power of limiting beliefs are.
I love that. I love that. So you're kind of injecting that in your classes, but not directly, like indirectly, but that is so helpful. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the whole thing too, is like, um, you know, our limiting beliefs, because most of our limitations are self-imposed. And that's one of the tenets of NLP is we have everything we need to be successful. Everything. We have everything we need. All of us, if we were to go unchecked, can be extremely successful.
Yeah.
Now it's due to some of the programming we received, going back to the programming metaphor, from our parents, from society, that causes us to come astray of that.
Yep.
So when students say I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm like, no, that's a lie. That's a lie you're telling yourself, a fallacy you're telling yourself.
That's great. That's the story.
That's just exactly the story you're telling yourself. And and now lose the reality. I'm like, okay, another thing we talk about is the brain neurology. Okay, math is a right brain skill. It's you have to use your right hemisphere for to do well in math. We're so used to using a left hemisphere for our language that it needs to be a muscle that has to be developed. So that's what I'm saying. I'm like, look, every time you're struggling in math, think of it like reframe it to, wow, I'm really strengthening my right hemisphere.
I like that.
And that's using a reframe. And that's what NLP is a lot about, reframing. So, reframing means putting in another perspective, giving you another perspective. Now, for actors, one of the reframes, because I hear a lot of people tell me when they hear I'm an agent, I'll hear people say, "Oh, I tried to be an actor, I didn't like the rejection," or some people say, "I wish I could be an actor, but I don't know how we'll deal with the rejection." And so a reframe of that could be, well, there's no such thing as rejection. It's only a simple reminder that your services are not needed today. So,
Wow.
because very often the truth of the matter is in the acting space, a lot of times why an actor didn't get the role has nothing to do with them or their talent. It has to do with their look, the image of the character, the archetype of the character, and the right actor just comes in and matches that, that's something you can control.
Right.
Really an audition, good audition is only 30 to 40% of the reason why you got the job or not. So the other 60% is out of your control as an actor. So why are you taking that personally if you didn't get the role? And that's where I'm like, stop, don't take, it's not personal. And so no, there's no rejection because it's not a personal thing. It's just, okay, this role is not the right fit for you. That's it. That's all it is.
I love that. Well, I've got to tie this back to your book, which is called Rise Above the Script. Tell me, Albert, what does that mean in your life?
So rise above the script. And I use the script as a metaphor for performing artists because that's what day to day you guide your work by professionally is a script. But we also run scripts internally all the time. Every one of us has a script. You have a
Oh,
script, I have a script that guides us through our day. And very often, going back to that limiting belief, that's a script.
I love
I'm
that.
not good
That's so
enough.
funny. It's so funny because I wrote this out. Where it says, if someone's writing the wrong script right now, which is your line, what is that first line they should change?
The first line is I'm capable. I
Mm,
am capable and successful. So going back to even like what I was saying in my class, the math thing, I'm capable of doing this. I can do this.
I like that.
And even going back to what we were taught at an early age, especially I'm a Gen X, but when we were taught at the train, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's great. But what if it's like instead of saying I think I can, we change the word think to know. I know I can, I know I can, I know I can.
Mm.
And when you know it, that's changing that one word in your script. I know I can do this. Or that one phrase, I know I can do this. I just need to work a little bit harder. Maybe I need to do, a little bit extra time on this or an extra dedication to this. Because a lot of people quit doing things before, right when they're about to get that breakthrough, they quit.
So Rise Above the Script is really about changing your lines.
Yeah. Changing the lines and changing your life and changing your limitation, rewriting your limitations.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm gonna have to get that book.
Thank you. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to get that
it's
book.
available on Amazon. I have it both as three formats. I have it as a paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
Okay,
So
my friends, that's where you know where to find it. So, okay, wrapping this up, Albert, if listeners walk away with one thing today, should it be?
I would say related to you have all the answers within you can do. You're capable.
You're capable. You're capable of doing the thing.
Yes.
Get Rise Above the Script book. My friends, if you're listening to this has been so great. Albert, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I would like to direct people to my website if possible, albertbramante.com. So on my website, if you wanted to try, there's a lot of hypnosis recordings that you can try
Okay.
and download, and they're on. I have a whole variety of issues from sleep to smoking to, confidence building to public speaking to leadership. There's something for everybody. I would encourage you to go through my website and you know definitely buy one of the recordings.
And can you say your website again?
Sure, it's my name, albertbramante.com.
AlbertBramante.com, my friends. Awesome. Albert, thank you so much for your time, for sharing with us. It's such an honor. I just feel like I could have a very extended, long conversation with you. I know this could go on. I may have to book another episode because you're so full of information and so sharing and giving and have worn so many hats as such a great teacher. And I really appreciate, I know there's so much more in you. And I just thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Is there anywhere else people can follow you or find you or check out your
You can follow me
agency?
on socials. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram and
Okay.
Facebook. So you can follow me there. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very open to having conversations.
That's great. You've heard it, my friends. There is Dr. Albert Bramante. He's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you, Wendy.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Embers Rising. If you're walking away from this conversation, my friend, with Dr. Albert Bramante, feeling like that no you heard last year just became the launchpad for your next big yes, good, because rejection isn't the end, it's the reroute. So your story, it's not meant to play out safely in the lines. It's meant to rise from the ashes louder, bolder, and more purpose-filled than ever. So here's your reminder. You're not too late. You're not behind. You're right on time for your next breakthrough. If this hit you deep, please share it. Text it to that friend who's ready to stop shrinking. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Rate us over on Spotify. And leave us a review if this episode sparks something inside you, because we read every single one. And as always, keep pushing boundaries, keep chasing big dreams, and most importantly, keep chasing those horizons. Aloha.